Well, howdy friends, welcome to episode 9 of the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell, and I have my co-host, Kylie Badgley. Kylie, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, how are you?
Doing great. So we have John and Meleena James on the podcast today. They are the college directors at Fredonia Hill Baptist Church in Nacogdoches, Texas, which is supposedly the oldest town in the state of Texas. So nobody really knows, but they claim that. But they're awesome. The reason why we invited them on the podcast is probably about maybe a couple years ago, through some of our events and Texas Roundup that they're going to talk about here in just a minute, they really felt this conviction of wanting to be closer to campus and really embed their life in with the college students that they're serving. They didn't want college ministry to just be a 9 to 5. They want to kind of embed their whole life. And so it was very interesting to hear about how just even being a young family, how they move closer to campus and give more of their lives, even with like 2 youngsters that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But pretty awesome to hear just kind of their heartbeat on how they do ministry really as a lifestyle, not like as a job per se.
Yeah, it was so good. I almost cried like 3 times during it. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it was just cool to hear her talk about being pregnant and how she was like, okay, I'm going to have to do less. But then God was like, actually, do more. So it was cool to hear her talk about that. And it's just cool to know that there's people like that in Nacogdoches, since my brother goes to school there. So that's cool. And yeah, it's the smallest town. And they have a blueberry festival that I really want to go to.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, y'all, this is good stuff. You want to listen in. It really is. You can tell that God has done an incredible work in their heart, and it's very inspirational and honestly really convicting on, hey, how are we opening up our lives to the people that we're actually ministering to? So y'all check out episode 9 with John and Meleena James of Fredonia Hill Baptist Church in Nacogdoches, Texas.
You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
John and Meleena, how are you?
We're doing good.
We're doing great, man. Thanks for having us on.
Man, glad to have y'all. Well, man, welcome to the podcast. I have with me Kylie Badgley, who is our co-host. Kylie, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, guys.
Awesome. Well, hey, we've been wanting to interview you guys for a while. We've gotten the opportunity to get to know y'all over the last couple of years and watch God do some pretty cool things in your family. And I think I met Meleena. I met you first, and you were, I think, pregnant at the time.
Probably.
Was it Owen? Was that your first?
Yes.
Okay, and then you have a second boy, correct?
Yes, we just had a second one in November.
Awesome. All right, so 2
November
little...
21st.
John's looking at his watch like, is that
Well,
right?
I realized that he's 2 months old today, so.
Oh, really?
Birthday.
So happy 2-month birthday.
I love it. So that's great. So got to meet John a little bit later, and so it's been cool to watch what God's been doing in your family. But why don't you guys just take a minute, and we just love to learn about you guys. How did y'all get to Nacogdoches, and how did you kind of get to where you're at?
Well, yeah, it's pretty cool. So we both actually grew up in Fort Worth, but never met each other.
Amen.
Until we came down to Nacogdoches.
Hey, by the way, what area of Fort Worth did you grow up in, John?
I grew up in smack dab middle of Fort Worth, and Meleena grew up in Saginaw. I was about 4 minutes away from the seminary and stuff. And
really? So like Crowley area?
No, like Fort Worth. I went to Southwest High School.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, and then Meleena was in the Saginaw, Boswell High School area.
I was there until 94.
Yeah. Well, so but then she actually came down a year before I did. And I came as a transfer student. And when we came to SFA, we got involved in college ministry just by being college students.
At Fredonia Hill. And
actually at the church that we now are employed by. Wow. And after staying with there, I was originally doing worship ministry. I thought God was going to call me to do music. And I think for a few years he did. And then he transitioned that call into college ministry. Mm-hmm. And Meleena was doing college ministry. She was an intern. And so she really graduated from volunteer to intern to director to our position now. which being in charge of the college ministry. And I went the different route. I did a lot with worship ministry and like led the youth band and all that stuff. And then they transitioned me into more of an assistant role within the church, where I got to fix copiers and printers. And I have no idea how to fix copiers or printers. I have no idea why I thought I could do it.
YouTube does.
Yes. So I gratefully gave up that job, though, when they offered me this one. And I guess it's been a year and a half that her and I have been full-time college ministry in this capacity.
Yeah.
She was doing college ministry by herself while I was still
Fixing copiers.
attempting to fix copiers.
Yeah.
And we got married in the middle of that.
Got married in the middle of that. Both of us graduated from the intern program. So I guess you could say we're products of the system.
Awesome. So when did y'all get married?
2017, February 2017.
Okay. All right.
Got pregnant 4 months into that.
Wow. Quick work, man. Love it. That's great. That's awesome. So Meleena, how did you get to the point? Because you have been, now how long have you been the college director there?
I have been about 2.5, 3 years. I think I'm going on 3 years.
Okay. And then John, you kind of stepped into that and y'all do that together about a year and a half ago. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be officially a year and a half. Of course, when you're married, we'll get to this later, but when you're married, you kind of share the same ministry.
Yeah.
I was fixing copiers by day and grooming 19-year-olds by night. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your ministry? What does that look like for y'all?
Yeah, so in Nacogdoches, that's home to Stephen F. Austin State University, where we are proud to be a lumberjack. We beat Duke this year, and that's the best thing in the world. But at SFA, there are about 13,000 students, so not an incredibly large campus, but that's still a large number in my book. And so we have the opportunity of being a church that is a multi-generational church, but has an emphasis on college students, and at the same time still try to have an emphasis on family ministry.
Gotcha.
So we're not a incredibly high budget church that just has all this money for college students. We are a thriving church that God has gifted us with a good budget, but we're nothing out of the ordinary. I just can't stress that enough. We're very much a normal church. From that, we have the opportunity to work with a large amount of ladies. SFA's demographics is, they'll officially say 60% female, 40% male, but there's no way those numbers are accurate. And so it's probably about 80-20.
Really? Wow.
And so our ministry is about 80-20. We spend a lot of time working with the ladies at SFA, which is fantastic having my wife on staff with that.
Yeah.
But then, so we do a heavy push on reaching the campus. I think the church needs to be involved on the campus and not just wait for students to walk into their doors. But once they are in part of our crew, we have an emphasis more on discipleship and raising up leaders. And so we're learning along those lines, and having just opportunity to join with different ministries in NAC that are already advancing the kingdom on campus. So that's the 50,000 foot view. There's a ton of more details, but that's the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you dive a little bit more into like what that looks like as far as I guess Meleena, like what does that look like for you to reach those girls and decide?
Yeah. So it's a little overwhelming sometimes. Because the primary reason is we have so many girls is there's nursing is a huge major at SFA, and teaching. Those are like the two primary reasons why people come to SFA. And so that just lends itself to girls. But it's been a journey for sure but a lot of it is being relational, and girls love to talk. I don't know if anybody knows that,
Yeah.
but they love just sitting and having somebody listen to them and have conversations with them. But a lot of it is also just groups, like getting girls to become friends with one another, and how to have healthy relationships. When girls know how to have healthy relationships and how to not get sucked into drama and not get sucked into and honor the Lord in those, they're phenomenal and advance the kingdom in crazy ways. And so that's, I think, what a lot of what I do is I sit with girls. We look at scripture and we dive into what does the Lord say just about relationships and how to love one another, how to serve one another. And also training and equipping other girls to do that. Cause we have a ministry of about 100 girls, and I'm like, I can have deep relationship with maybe 10 if I'm lucky, and walk deeply with them. But just kind of constantly putting the challenge back in their hands of going, okay, I can't sit with the 100, like I can't sit with the 1,000 or the 10,000, but like you can sit with 3 of them, and then the next 3, and then the next 3. And I would just say that that's how our ministry in a lot of ways has continued to multiply, has just been through putting the challenge back in their hands. Cause I'm realizing like I can only do 10 or 30 if I can get you 30 of them in my living room, and but just giving it back to them time and time again, and then just letting them talk. So
well, I would also add to that, we've learned just as we deal with Generation Z and in a postmodern world that everyone is heavily relationally oriented. And so I think culture just in general is moving past the large group gatherings and large altar call moments. I think we're moving much more into interpersonal relationships. And so when we view ministry, it's all about relationships. We say we want to help you with your relationship with the Father. We want to help you with your relationship with your biblical community. When you help you build a relationship with people who don't love Jesus, so that in your relationships you can share the gospel. And I think that's what we model with these girls. And we do that with the guys, a little different, less talking, more working out. But in that, we are always just trying to build a relationship and thrive from relationship instead of just a large event gathering. So yeah, a lot of in-house things as well.
That's wonderful. Well, hey, I would love to. One of the things that you guys shared with us, we talked about this at Texas Roundup. We talked about this just a little bit ago. Is that you guys actually made a move closer to campus just because of conviction, also just because of where you guys are at in life with 2 kids. And so I would love to hear just kind of about that and why you guys decided that, hey, we want to move closer to campus to do ministry.
Yeah, well, it started when I first got pregnant with Owen, our firstborn, and kind of just realized that this doesn't fit like this in what I believed the Lord had called me to do, to reach college students, to invest deeply there, to challenge girls and love girls. A lot of times you think like, okay, being a mom, it's like, okay, I'm having a kid. I'm supposed to just kind of take a step back from ministry. And John and I just began praying about it and put everything back on the table before the Lord. And no, he just very clearly said, no, I want you to continue to pick up this baton, to continue to press forward in ministry. And actually, I'm going to give you more. Like, I'm going to ask more of you. And I was like, I don't have more, like, what does this look like? And he just continued to press in, like, seek, like, if you seek me, you'll find me. And realizing the Lord doesn't just like withhold things from us. And so I said, okay. And he just started saying, okay, I'm going to ask you guys to use your home. And I was like, what in the world does that look like? Like, we've never seen that model before. We don't know what that is. And around that time is when we went to Texas Roundup, and I'll let John pick up here.
Well, Texas Roundup just in general was a huge eye-opener for us because, well, so like I said earlier, everything for us is about relationships and being in the context relationship, and understanding that when Jesus groomed his disciples, he didn't do it with these large gatherings and it was just sermon on Sunday. He did it life on life with them, sleeping in the same room, eating in the same room, living with them. So I remember we had conversations with Scott Kindig and Drew Worship, and we were really just, what does this look like to model this same concept that Jesus carried with. And Meleena and I just realized that being next to campus and creating space in our home for college students to be welcomed, but not just in a place where you can be nice and hospitable, but creating a culture where they're literally wanting to be there so they can receive nourishment spiritually, so they can come and weep on our couch. They can come and receive love when they need it, a meal, more than just being hospitable and I'll see you next week, but kind of creating a family culture. And God just told us that being next to campus and being walking distance from campus was a non-negotiable. So that was a little bit of a challenge. God was blessing us financially, but living close to campus was still a little out of our price range, because if you're in a college town and you're within walking distance of campus, you can buy a house and rent it for literally anything you want. Yeah. So God blessed us with, there was a lady that Meleena was mentoring whose grandmother owned a house, and we began to meet with her, and God challenged me very directly to ask for a rent that was affordable, and she came down to our price, and God just provides this house, and then provides 2 college girls to actually come live with us, a girl within our ministry, actually 2 girls within our ministry, and so that allows us to really take our ministry, instead of just saying it's 8 to 5, Monday through Thursday, and then Sunday, it allows us to say, look, I don't think God's call in your life fits within 8 to 5. I think it is your life, and this is what God's asking you to do. And whether or not it's your vocation that you get a paycheck, or it's just God's calling on your life, that's who you are. So we kind of just threw all those things out the window and said, we want to be a place right by campus. So just last night, we had some college students over at our house. We drank milkshakes and watched a movie. And
MLK.
Yeah, we call it milkshakes and MLK. And so, well, we have college girls.
Hey, just to give our listeners some context, there was MLK Day, so.
Oh, 100%, yes. We didn't just watch that on a random day. Yesterday was MLK Junior Day.
Yeah.
We had milkshakes, but we just had college girls walking from their dorm, and they'll come to our house, or we'll throw a house party, and we'll table all day on campus, and we'll throw a house party, and people who had never set foot inside of a church will come to our house party, and as a result, we'll befriend them and allow them to get involved in certain things. So I went on a little bit of a ramble there, but God just provided the house, and that allowed us to do what he's asked us to do in a deeper level.
Yeah. I thought it was cool because it was just like John and I were asking the Lord all these questions. I remember like I had just in my journal just very specific questions, and we sat down, and it's cool because we sat down at a table with Drew and Scott, and it was like they just like bullet point answered my questions of like what it could look like, and practical things of how to welcome college students in your house. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is, Lord, you're like right here, and but it was just exciting, and us kind of coming back from that and just going, okay, we're going to take like actual steps into what this looks like, but
yeah, absolutely. I think that was also right around the time that God really began solidifying his call and ministry in my life to be college students. We talk about all the time about calling, and we say that calling, you don't just stumble upon your calling. You don't wake up and realize, oh, I'm called to do college ministry. We think God forms it within your heart. And so as a result, I think those conversations are when I started saying, okay, yes, this is definitely what God is asking me to do. And I think that's been great for our family, because as a family, we're able to do ministry instead of just me as the man going off to the office and working there, but rather just as a family unit, doing ministry together, loving on college students together.
Yeah. So could y'all talk a little bit more about, I know you talked about your calling, and like God was telling you to like, not take a step back, but to like do more with college ministry when you're pregnant. And then you talked about how you kind of had planned to do like music ministry. And so just, for people that are like, feeling like God's calling them to do something different than they planned? Like, just what was that like for y'all, and how could you maybe, encourage those people, and when it can feel like hard to be obedient?
Well, that's a great question. And the short answer is say yes to the Lord. That's the short answer. We tell our students this, that maturity in Christ is just someone who's said yes to God for a very long time. So the short answer is to say yes. The long answer is that I was convinced I was going to do music for years and had to get it out of my system, I guess, per se.
Yeah.
So I'm not here saying I got it the first time. And no, I definitely thought I was going to do music for a while. Started a band, did everything in my power to travel, and ran myself way past my capacity until a mentor, our pastor, gave me some direction and just said, look, God is moving this way in your life. And you're trying to move another way, and you're not dishonoring the Lord in your movement that way, but look at the projection and trajectory of what God's doing in your life. Don't fight the current. And that really allowed me to understand, okay, God is asking me, we want to join in with a movement of God, not necessarily always try to just spark and create one.
Yeah.
And so when it was like a no-brainer at that moment. So I want to join in with what God's doing instead of trying to force something. I'm learning more and more, still a young man, but I'm learning a ton that when I create, when I try to force things instead of just going with what God's provided, it doesn't always work out. So that's the short answer to that. The long answer is longer.
Short is short, long is long.
Yeah, I would add to that of just in my scenario where I felt like the Lord had called me to ministry and got pregnant, and I didn't see how they went together. Like I didn't see how the Lord had in the calling where being able to do what I was doing at the same capacity with having a child was possible. And I can remember like just going before the Lord and going, okay, what does this look like? And he just continued to say over and over, like, just trust me, and say yes, like, and don't just take steps back because you can't see. And I was like, okay, okay, I'm gonna remain faithful. And just in that, being on the other side, had Owen, and he's now 1.5 years. We've seen the church step up and provide childcare. We've seen, like Owen isn't just this kid that we have at home. He's like the college mascot, like everybody knows who he is. Everybody, and it's so sweet because it's not just like, it's rewarding for them, it's rewarding for him. Like we joke about like how many kids in 20 years are going to come back and be like, oh, Owen, we did this together. And he's going to be like, I have no idea who you are.
I remember when you were this big.
Yeah. And, but it's just been sweet to see, like, when the Lord calls you to something, he provides. He provides that calling. When he asks for more, he's not asking for more just out of your strength, because we can't provide anything. It's going, if I'm asking for more, I'm going to give you more also. I'm going to give you what you need to be not just like surviving in this time of life, because that's a soapbox. I think moms are like, oh my gosh, I'm just surviving. And I'm like, no, like God gives you what you need, not to just survive, but thrive and bring like excellence to the table, and you're still able to love people. Motherhood doesn't just like rob you from being able to work in the kingdom. It's actually brought like, I can add more now, like I can give more. I have more to share with a college girl in my living room than I did 1.5 years ago, just because I've been a mom. And now I look back and I go, oh, okay, this is why, like this is why Owen's been a part of this. This is why we now have a second kid. And it's been sweet to just see that.
Well, I also want to add, we've also been gifted with a church that is working with our schedule and works with our works with the situation, because I think I don't want to paint the picture that we are just always working or never working or always at home or never at the office. What we have to be very, very scheduled, and we have to be very detail oriented of, these is my office time. This is a time when I'm home with my child. This is a time when we're having kids over for our students. Sorry. We're having students over for dinner. This is a time that I'm going to go do something personal for me. I'm going to go read a book. We have to be very segmented with our time, because we want to use the time that God's given us in our house for ministry. But I also need to go in the office. Like, I need to do logistics. I need to do details, office work. And so being very systematic in that approach, I think, is a part that's not talked about a ton. We just say, like, do ministry within your home, let God use you where you're at, but you've got to be detailed if that's going to survive.
Man, I have so many questions. Where do I start?
Come on, fire them away, Mitch. I'm ready.
Well, I want to start, because this is kind of personal to me right now with motherhood and ministry. Me and my wife, we were about 6 weeks till our due date, and one of the things that we're wrestling with is, you feel like, as this baby's coming, like, you got to pull back. Let's pull back. Let's guard. We got to pull back from a lot of things, but from what sounds like with you guys, if you guys have really leaned into saying, hey, we, as far as you, and when you said, Meleena, that, that the Lord was asking you, saying, hey, I want to use this for actually more ministry, not less ministry. It's not like, well, it's not just, you have a ministry to your family, but you're saying, hey, God wants to use my ministry and my family, but he also wants to use it with college students. And you've kind of done more ministry probably maybe since you've had a child. And so that's something that me and my wife Olivia are just wrestling through as well. And because, in fact, we've just got out of this interim season. We were interim college minister at church for 14 months, and we live 20 miles from campus. Maybe it's like 18.7, but almost 20 miles from campus. And what we found is that girls would continually drive that 20 miles to our house to meet with Olivia. And so we just actually made a decision that we actually want to stay there, just because the ministry has been so fruitful and great for her. And so I would love to hear more about how you have used motherhood as just this means of ministry to not only just continue to love your family well, but also love students. Can you just flesh that out a little bit more, Meleena, what that looks like?
Yeah. So one of the things in that is the Lord specifically in motherhood has asked me to allow college students to see the things that are normally unseen.
Yeah.
Like in all they've seen in family has been what they experienced in their home. And we're seeing time and time again that a lot of times that has not been gospel centered, has been very broken, has been very hurtful, has been, and so they only know what they've seen, and everything else is just theory. Like everything else is just a book that they've read, or is just a podcast they've listened to, and realizing like they have a deep desire for girls to be godly wives. Like they have a deep desire to be a godly mom, but they've never seen it. And that's been something that I think is really cool about what John and I get to do, is when we open our home, and like they get to see when Owen throws a tantrum, and they get to see like, what does this look like for Meleena to step in and to love him and to correct him, and what are the things that she gets to say. And so many times it's been cool, like to hear them just go, man, I've never seen it done that way. Or that was cool how you like were able to remain just totally calm in that situation and allow him to just feel what he was feeling at the moment, because he's 1.5,
Yeah.
And but it's like, those are the things that I've had girls sit with me while I was going online grocery shopping, and they're like, oh my gosh, like you do that and you do this. Or when we're cooking dinner, when I'm cooking for a family, I had a girl just kind of, she goes, you're gonna have to like teach me how to figure all of this out. And I'm like, man, I didn't like, those are the things that I didn't ever think of them hearing like, well, I'm taking this off the grocery cart because we only budgeted $100 for this week's groceries.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you like stay within that, you know how much you're spending, you know, and all of those things. But those are the unseen things, you know, those are the things that I was never taught. Those are the things that I don't like, my mom did, and I didn't never think about them. But these girls are in that season where they're about to step into that. You know, they're about to step into family lives. They're about to step into, you know, like some of them are thinking that children are 10 years, 20, like not even. And I'm like, no, it's like maybe 4 years from now or like 2 years or next year, you know, like you never know. And so I know that's kind of like a long response, but it's been, I can't even tell you how many times I've just being a mom and learning how to do all these things and being willing to be vulnerable and transparent and let them see the things that most people try to hide or try to, oh, I have to like, sorry, my kid's like throwing a tantrum, you might want to leave, but letting them sit and stay has just been really cool.
Yeah, just letting them get to see just like the everyday stuff of life. Man, I love that. That's good.
Yeah, that's so cool. I've even seen that in my own life, just like been in places where I'm like, I don't know I'm here, but then I have these like great examples of like godly couples and marriages and parenting and stuff. So it's really cool. I guess that what I've been wondering listening to y'all is like, so you do all this stuff in your house, but you know, the typical, I guess, way is like, you know, you have a college group on Sunday and some people do like a midweek stuff. Do you do that stuff as well?
Well, sure. So when we first got married, some very wise and very loving people, they told us this, and they said, never go out of your house more than 2 nights a week. They meant that, and they said, before the sake of your marriage. And this is not any disrespect to them, but what we've realized is that just creates a guarding against letting college students embrace your life. It creates this wall up of, well, I can do. So just think about your life. Say you have church on Sunday. Well, what happens if you have a life group on Sunday night? Well, that's one night. Okay. And if you personally want to go out and do something, say you're a part of, you work out at a gym on Tuesdays, or I'm a part of a run club, so I go run on Tuesday nights. Well, there's my 2 nights right there. And all I did was just do an organized event with college students and went and worked out. And what we realized was God was asking us to do a lot of unorganized yet organized, scheduled and planned time with college students. When I mean by unorganized was there wasn't a label for it. This wasn't life group. This wasn't a midweek. This wasn't a Wednesday night service. It wasn't prayer meeting. But it was you in my living room, and it was you sitting on our couch telling us about what God's doing in your life. It was us praying with you. It also was us sitting down watching a football game, letting you hang out with our child. So yes, we do have other services. We still have Sunday school hour during Sunday school in our main service. We still have life groups. We have numerous life groups throughout the week. Everything we try to do is we try to do it in-house in someone's living room so that we can create relationships. Everything is geared around relationships for us. And then we have once a month, we have a worship service with other churches in town. And plus being on campus, we're on campus once a week where we're handing out coffee and oranges and getting to know people, build relationships so that we can have intentional conversations with them later. Once a month, we'll do a large event on campus for the purpose of outreach. What we found in that is that, once again, it has to be geared toward relationship. You have to fuel it by, hey, bring the person that you've developed your relationship with to this fun event. we say it's all about real fun family. We want to be real. We want to have fun. We want to be a family. And we think that's what God's asking us to do. So those are some things that we really value. So yes, we have events and we focus on those events. And so like just last night we had an event. And on Thursday we're having an event. But tonight we have 3 college students coming over. Tomorrow we have 6 college students coming over. And we're just trying to create a culture that's community. That's Acts 2. So I think it's planned and organized, yet untitled events that allow us to do the type of ministry that we think Jesus did.
That's a great thought. And so I want to jump into this. So you mentioned, so this is kind of this organic, like life on life, moving closer to campus, people are in our home, seems very fluid, but yet there is this kind of a method to the madness a little bit of just that it is organized. So John and Meleena, what do you, because we do have listeners that they do have bosses that expect them to be in the office. They expect them, you can't just live out of your home. Everyone's leadership is different. So how have y'all, how's that balance been of living out this conviction of we want to do ministry from our home, and also having a great relationship with your superiors and making sure you're kind of fulfilling those, you understand what I'm saying here? Of fulfilling those kind of obligations to where it's like, well, there's John and Meleena, they're just hanging out at the house, like that kind of thing. So how does that flesh itself out?
Well, to be fair, we have an office at the church that we do work at. This morning we were up there for meetings, had a staff meeting. We're working on things, had to talk to financial personnel, had to work with our media director. So we're up at the office doing things.
Gotcha. A
lot of what that is us being strategic about when do we have childcare. And I actually do a lot more out of the house during the day. So 8 to 5, or Meleena gives me a time to be home, and I try to be home during that time. But during that day, I'm gone, and I will work either on campus, or I'll work at a coffee shop, or I'll work at the church office. And so I schedule meetings in all 3 of those locations. But we use the time at the church to be very diligent, to be productive on logistics, to be productive on details, and planning ahead. And maybe I'm working on a lesson or something. I use that time, and then that allows us to use the time that we're not in the office to be more relational. So that's been a good divider for me, is that when I go to the office, I essentially am working in the sense that I'm planning, I'm working with church community builder, I'm doing role, like all those things that are church office work. Working on my budget. But if I'm going to mentor someone, if I have a discipleship relationship, I try to meet them off campus of my office in order that I can not have this hat on of logistics and details, but I can say, hey, Nathan, how was your week? Where did you see God move? I want to sit down in a comfier chair with a cup of coffee and, hey, just so tell me what's going on. Whereas, so later today, we're going to go back up to the office for a team meeting. We have 2 interns currently that are working with our college ministry. And so the 4 of us are going to talk about planning events. We're going to talk about our event on Thursday. We're going to talk about Sunday mornings. We're going to talk about life groups, right? We're going to plan events. That's going to be at a work setting because it is logistics. But we try to do a lot of life things outside of the office, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But I would say also, just to add to that, it takes a lot of communication.
Yeah.
With, you kind of asked about what does that look like with our superiors and our bosses, and where's our accountability? And we've been blessed incredibly with a boss that loves us and trusts us. I think we've been it hasn't just formed overnight. He's trained us, molded us, worked with us for the last 6 years. And so there's a lot of trust that's been established there, but he has access to our calendar, he can see who we're meeting with, what we're kind of doing if he wants to. John, we have to like clock hours, that kind of like those things are still in place. And it's just kind of, we have some of the freedom to be able to steward that the way that our family can still be healthy and can still thrive within that.
Yeah, you read my mind. That's what I was gonna ask you about. And like, was it kind of just gradual? Like, he trusts you, and you slowly were just like, oh, we want to do this, or did you have a conversation that was like, hey, like, we want to be like out of the office a lot doing these things, and like, did you have a conversation to like work out a plan for that?
Yeah. So a lot of he was our pastor Kendall McDonald. He was in the process with us of kind of formulating how this was going to work. Like he was in the process of, like he was one of the first people to know, like, oh, Meleena is pregnant, like, what does this look like? And John, like, was a part of the conversation of John feeling called to college ministry. And
so he recognized from an early standpoint that if we were going to do college ministry long term, we were clearly still going to have a family. And so he wanted to create a system where we could do both. So I would say to a pastor or a college pastor who's thinking about creating a system like that, you just need to have an honest conversation, and you need to talk with someone who's implemented that system. What I get really nervous about is when we're in the church building all day, and when we clock out, we think, I'm done with work, I'm going home. But college students, they don't work 8 to 5. They want to have the deepest conversation of their life at 10:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And they want to do that when you have already laid in your bed.
Yeah. So that's funny, is there's a number of people I've heard that it says there's something around that 10 p.m. mark where the vulnerability just comes out. So you got to stay up past 10 to get to the good stuff with students.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember one time we had a long day, and I finally finished. I came back to our bedroom. I took my shoes off, got a text. Someone's life just gone crazy. He's like, I'm coming over. And so I go, I'm gonna go make some coffee. But that's when I'm just concerned with that. When you say work is 8 to 5, that means at 5:30, it's not work. And so I say this very lovingly. You honestly have to just say, you and your spouse have to come to a point where you say, this is our life. We're giving it to what we think God's asked us to do. If we're going to get paid this amount for this amount of hours, that's fine. God, please provide. But we are going to give ourselves to this time. And we're blessed to have a pastor and elders that work with that. So, yeah.
That's so good. Oh.
And I think we've gotten a lot of like, well, what about your marriage? Like, how is it not falling apart? Like, I mean, if you look at our calendar, we have dinners with students every night, like except for Friday night. And you have people look at us and we're crazy. And we've just kind of said, like, we're going to trust that the Lord, like, just that we're not fearful of our marriage falling apart because we're saying yes to the call that God's put on our life. Like, we don't want to be governed by fear in that. And, we know, like, our marriage isn't just going to fall apart tomorrow. Like, we know when we need to sit down and have a conversation. We know, like, and it's just, we know when we've got to hit pause and kind of recalibrate. And, but that's just kind of where we've got to constantly be attentive to the Holy Spirit and one another and be mindful of each other. And in a lot of ways, I feel like John and I have to communicate a ton,
More. We have to improve our communication. Yeah.
Yeah. And expectations and all of those things. And
so what would be out of all this and this transition in ministry of saying, hey, it's not just a 9 to 5, a lifestyle of ministry. people even coming to your students in your house, but also students even living in your house. We've talked a lot about the good things. What are some things just to, if somebody is living this kind of lifestyle, what are some things that maybe that have not gone so well, or maybe some roadblocks or maybe some landmines? You say, hey, just these are things you need to think about before you, if this is something kind of a lifestyle you're considering kind of living.
Yeah. So Meleena could probably speak to this more, but you have to figure out how to make meals that are for 6 people and that aren't rice and beans. So I know that's incredibly practical, but figuring out how to cook for large amounts of people, you really do have to plan. You've got to plan your life. We have built-in accountability things, having 2 college girls live here. And so knowing when someone can be home and when someone can't be home and communicating. So that is a system that you have to have in place, and you have to really communicate well. I think communication, ministry, 80% of ministry is communication, I feel like. It's all about talking with someone. Do you have any other thoughts on that matter?
Yeah. I would say ministry's gotten a lot messier as you start living closer with people and investing deeper and caring more and loving more. It gets messier, and I think realizing for me, it's just some things have gotten a lot more personal with just loving girls and realizing that the fight isn't against flesh and blood, and being able to have hard conversations. And that has been something I've had to learn, having college girls live with us. And but gosh, there's been so many times it's been like, after every hard conversation that I've had to go into, of just going, oh, I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to say these things. I don't want to have this conversation. Those have sometimes been the most transformative and the most fruitful. And it's like having girls live with us. People are like, so what happens if like something goes wrong? Like, what happens if, like they do something they're not supposed to? And I'm like, we talk about it, I have to be able to, we hold them to a standard, and if they don't meet that standard, if they don't, like, it's not just this, oh, you have to move out, but it's a conversation. And that's just, I think one thing that I've learned is just going, have the hard conversations. Like, it's okay that it's messy, trust the Lord in it. And quickly like when people get mad or when people get upset, or just quickly dust off your feet that your identity rests in the Lord, and he's the one that holds you secure. And so that's what I would kind of add in that. But it comes back to communication, communicating.
I think one of the things we learned really on was that we had to be structured in order to do this. So I'm not naturally structured. I've learned structure. Well, I don't know. I'm somewhere in the middle of learning structure. And so simple things like where this goes in the pantry, or where these pots and pans go, or because if you're going to have college students in your house, you're going to have college students doing your dishes, which means you're going to have the dishes not where they belong. And that doesn't matter. Or you're going to have college students eating your food, and that ice cream you thought was so sacred and yours is gone. Although I do hide my fancy coffee from my roommates, so they can't find it.
Hey, that sounds expensive, man. You got to hide it.
You got to hide it. It's important. So it's just a lot of working together. I read Feel the Flame, and there was a little appendix part that talks about having a college student live with you. And I remember sitting at my desk. I was late at night. Melina was already asleep. And God, is this something you're asking us to do? And reading his perspective on it. And he said, look, it is 100% the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Like one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. After about 3 weeks, the newness of them is going to wear off, and you're going to create a new culture, and you're going to have conversations. But she said it's entirely rewarding. And I remember saying, okay, God, we're going to do it. And God highlights individuals, and we have conversations like, well, who is God asking for us to live with, and who's asking him to live with us? And well, it just actually enhances our ministry. They allow us to do the ministry that God's asked us to do. And I could say, yeah, there are moments like, oh, that was awkward, or that didn't go well, or
Yeah.
whatever. But it's 10,000 times more rewarding than not having them.
So we've been talking a lot about like how y'all are doing this, like you're doing ministry out of your house and like super close to campus. But you talked about how you have so many college girls in your ministry and you meet with them all the time. So I think it would be cool to know just like, what is maybe the most common struggle that you hear these girls going through, and like what do you tell them? Like how do you work them through that? This potentially could be a whole nother podcast, but
Oh man, yeah. I think a lot of, I would say that I run into is just anxiousness, worry, whether it's over a test or their future or their boyfriend, or it's a lot of like, am I making the right decision? am I taking the right steps? And a lot of the time it's as simple as like, okay, trust the Lord, like just you're okay, it's okay. And and it's seek wise counsel. And a lot of times I get to have that conversation because they're seeking wise counsel. But it's just so much worry. And a lot of times, John, it's funny, I learned this from John. We were in a moment and I was stressing out to the max and super worried. And he just kind of looked at me very straight in the face and he goes, you're either going to trust the Lord or not. And I just was like, first of all, I was like, excuse me.
Yeah.
But it really like challenged me. And I think that a lot of times that's kind of what I ask the girls. I kind of go, okay, this is what you're worrying about. This is what you're anxious about. What does God say about that? What does his word say about that? What is all of those things? And then I make them take the next step and go, okay, now are you going to choose to believe it? Are you going to choose to believe what God says to be true? And they have to come to that decision. And then I tell them, every time that worry comes up in your mind, just find, like in these verses, in these things that God has said to be true, find one word that you can just repeat to yourself to shut it down. Whether it's like, okay, God's going to be faithful. And so when that worry pops up, like train your brain to say, God's going to be faithful. Like he's going to take care of this, or he's trustworthy, or he's provider, or, but yeah, that's just kind of, I think in almost every one of the times I sit down with a girl, it's a worry about something or anxious about something. And so, yeah.
Man, that's good stuff. Yeah. Well, John, Meleena, this has been a fantastic conversation. Probably continue to go on and on. There's a lot to talk about, but I look forward to seeing you guys here in a few months at Roundup. And man, it's always good to have you guys. And I think what you guys are doing as a couple is so awesome and really important to see. I think people see husband and wife doing a ministry alongside each other, and how y'all do that in such a different way and different kind of capacity. I know that I've learned a lot just thinking about even my own marriage with Olivia and our new child to be here in a little bit. So you guys have really blessed me.
Well, thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I mean, I just gotta be honest. If you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, man, I don't know if I should go to Roundup or not, the answer is yes.
Thanks. Hey, by the way, and I did not ask John to do this, so this is all organic stuff.
Yeah,
right
the
here.
answer is yes, you should go to Roundup. I try to bring as many as my leadership team as possible, and I just tell them, look, this changed my perspective of college ministry.
Yeah.
And God is doing a work. The scripture says that we do not have a harvest problem. We have a laborer problem.
Yeah.
And so the harvest is ready and the laborers are few. Yeah. If you're looking at training laborers, I would say go to Roundup.
Man.
So we can't wait to come. I have people texting me. I have our people on our leadership team just last week text me, what are the dates? It's 5 months from now, but I want to make sure I'm there. So we're excited about it.
I love it. Well, you guys are awesome. Thanks for being on the show, and we look forward to seeing y'all in May.
All right. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a great day.
You too. See you. Well, that was great stuff by John and Meleena, and honestly, really convicting as I even think about, even I think when this podcast probably drops, so we have our baby due me and Olivia in early March. So when this drops, the baby's probably here, but just kind of helping think through what does ministry look like as you have a family and how they give more. It's just, to me, it's really fascinating and honestly a little convicting. So
Yeah, it was so good. And I think a good one, if you really liked it and you want to know more of like how you can do that in your own home, you should listen to the episode that we have with Drew Worsham, because he talked a lot about how they let people in their home and students and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, check out episode 6. That's a great podcast with Drew, probably one of our better ones. So that would be great content to look at. Well, guys, thanks for being on the podcast today. Hey, remember, rate and review our podcast. That is super helpful. And follow us on social media so you can keep up with when we share these podcasts. So we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We also have a Facebook group that you can join called the Roundup Network. You can get in there. It'll put you in a network of almost 200 college leaders from all over the state. Super, super helpful. But y'all, thanks for listening in.